What's up, beautiful people? Today we're going to be checking out Vivek Ramaswamy's speech at the Michigan GOP Leadership Conference. Let's get to it.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Nice. It's good to be here. I am seeing a few familiar faces and many more new ones. So I'll tell you a bit about who I am and what I think rests ahead. My name is Vivek Ramaswamy. It's Vivek, it rhymes with cake, as some of you may have heard. My parents came to this country with no money 40 years ago. In a single generation, I have gone on to found multiple multi-billion-dollar companies. I did it while marrying my wife, Apurva, raising our two sons, and following our faith in God. That is the American dream. And I am genuinely worried that American dream will not exist for our two sons and their generation unless we do something about it. Thank you. Sounds a lot better, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
This will work. They know I like to pace a little bit, so they're giving me my microphone. But we can stay up here today. We'll make it easy. So I'm going to talk to you about something that's been on my mind recently that I haven't talked about on the campaign trail yet, but it's an honest description of where I think we are as a country. I think we're in the middle of a war in this country. It's not a war between black and white. It's not a war between man and woman. It's not even a war between Democrat and Republican, not really.
An identity war?
It's a war between the 80% of people in this country who share the ideals of our founding, who share the idea that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, who share the ideals that we are individuals, not riding some tectonic plate of group identity, but individuals who determine our destiny with our own free will, who believe in meritocracy, free speech, open debate, self-governance over aristocracy, who believe in the dream that we, the people, create a government that is accountable to us rather than the other way around, who believe in Martin Luther King's creed that you get ahead in this country not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and your contributions. Most Americans I know, black or white, even Democrat or Republican, share these basic ideals in common. Mm-hmm. And they are on one side of this war. On the other side, we have 20% of this country that believes that your identity is based on your race, your gender, and your sexual orientation. That if you're black, you're inherently disadvantaged. That if you're white, you're inherently privileged. No matter your economic background or your upbringing, your race, your gender, and your sexuality determine who you are and what you can achieve in life. They believe in the words of Ibram Kendi, that the remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. That the remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. They believe in group quota systems over meritocracy. They believe that we have to flog ourselves for our own success in this country by vaguely pledging allegiance to this new cult of climate change that says we have to abandon our way of life here in the United States, that we can use our own military to protect somebody else's border halfway around the world from an armed invasion, when we cannot justifiably use our own military to secure our own border in this country. That is what this other side believes. And here's what I've learned.
Well, when you state that, are you saying your government is in the 20%? Because the government, the people in power right now, that's what they're currently doing. You know, using your military to protect others halfway around the world, the way he put it. You know, the American government is currently doing that. So would he say the American government is part of that 20%? Just asking.
You can't win a war unless you know that you're in one. First step is seeing it. These two worldviews are incompatible. You cannot believe in group quotas and meritocracy at the same time. Pick one, you can't have both. You cannot believe in the pursuit of excellence and genetic victimhood at the same time. You can't have both. Pick one. You cannot believe in American exceptionalism, the things that got us this far in to the American experiment, that idea that economic growth is not something we should apologize for, that capitalism is the best known system to man to lift people up from poverty, while also those same carbon emissions to places like China. You cannot agree on both of these things at once. Pick one. You can't have both. These are two mutually exclusive worldviews. They cannot coexist. And that's what we have to recognize. So the good news I have for you is that 80% of this country believes what I just told you. Much of the division that you're taught to believe that we suffer in this country by watching cable news at night, by turning on your social media algorithms. You would be taught to believe that this is a 50-50 tug of war in this country. We're on our way to a breaking point. That's false. I can tell you as somebody who has now been to a majority of states, including over the course of the last couple of years and in this campaign, that division is artificial. It is made up. It is a projection designed to divide and conquer the people. At least 80% of this country shares the same basic values that we do. Sure, we might disagree on whether corporate tax rates should be high or low. We might disagree on whether ivermectin treats COVID, for that matter. These are details.
According to Dr. Joe Rogan, it does.
But most of us in this country agree on those basic rules of the road. And in fact, half the 20 are people younger than me who never learned those ideals in the first place. We're going to bring them along too. But here's the mystery. If 80 to 90% of this country is on the side of believing in our founding ideals, then why is it that the other side is actually winning this war? That's a deeper story that goes back to the failure of institutions in this country. I haven't given this speech before in this campaign, but they tell me this is a little too complicated to go through. Simplify it. Keep it simple, they tell me. I refuse to oversimplify to falsehood, that the reality is complicated, so we're going to get into that complexity today. A lot of this started in the 2008 financial crisis. How did this happen, that this fringe philosophy, this idea that your genetics determine who you are, race, gender, sexuality, climate, how did that fringe philosophy from the halls of academia that began as a challenge to the system, how did that become the new system? A lot of this dates back to the 2008 financial crisis. I'll tell you, I was a fresh graduate then. I got my first job in New York City in the fall of 2007, on the eve of the '08 crisis. I saw it unfold. What happened was, going into the '08 crisis, and it's interesting with the auto worker strike going on now, there's some parallels here. Occupy Wall Street was upset about the bailouts. I saw the bailouts. They were crony bailouts. I opposed them. That came from Republicans, by the way. This isn't a Republican versus Democrat issue. What the old left wanted to say was to want to take money from those wealthy corporate fat cats and redistribute it to poor people to help poor people. Agree or not, that is what the old left had to say. But there was the birth of this new left, right around that same time, back around '08, that had a slightly different theory of the case. They said, you know what? The real problem isn't economic injustice in this country. It is racial injustice and misogyny and bigotry and climate change. You know, if you're Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street is a tough pill to swallow. But the new woke stuff is actually pretty easy. Put some token minorities on your boards. Muse about the racially disparate impact of climate change as you fly in a private jet to Davos. Pretty good work if you can get it. So they made a deal. They said, listen, we'll say what you want us to say. We'll put those token minorities on our boards, do whatever else you want us to do. But we will not do it for free. We expect the new left to look the other way when it comes to leaving our corporate power structure intact. And it worked. It was an arranged marriage, not a marriage of love. It was more like mutual prostitution. And the net result of that act was the birth of a new Leviathan, a new monster, a hybrid of state power and corporate power that was far more powerful than either one alone, what I call the woke industrial complex. That's where it began with the '08 crisis. Then Silicon Valley. spotted this trend and said, hey, we're going to get on that act. Remember, the old break up big tech, that didn't come from conservatives. That came from the left. So what Silicon Valley realized was, hey, we can play the same game. We will censor hate speech or misinformation as you define it. We're happy to do that for you, but we won't do it for free. We expect the new left to look the other way when it comes to leaving our monopoly power intact. And again, that trade worked masterfully. It was a marriage of convenience. So now you see this trend of how you captured a fringe 10% captures one institution after another. Big banks, corporate America, Wall Street, Silicon Valley. Well, now turn to the U.S. military. You wonder where the wokeness in the U.S. military, the infestation of anti-Americanism in our own military, where did it come from?
In the military.
I'll tell you where it came from. In the same period of time, what was happening? The Republican-led war in Iraq failed us the same way the bank bailouts did. This is not a Republican versus Democrat story. It's far deeper than that. So the old left used to be a critic of the Iraq war, used to be a critic then of the endless wars that we spent trillions, now $3 trillion of taxpayer money spent from Iraq to Afghanistan. To what end? 20 years later, the Taliban still controls Afghanistan. Iraq still hostile to the United States with Iranian encroachment. To what end? Tens of thousands of American lives. So agree or not with the old left, they pointed this out. Well, then you get the likes of General Mark Milley to say that, you know what, don't worry about all that. I'll preach about white rage and systemic racism. That defangs the old left, and the new left puts them up for adoption. Well, then you turn to the college education system, a system that told people my age, and I'm a millennial, I understand why young people are disaffected from politics and from the government because I've lived it. Said that, hey, you get a 4-year college degree. You're going to get ahead. Live the American dream. Take on that college debt, but you're going to get ahead. Well, many of my college peers still haven't paid off their college debts. So
and he's 38, so people close to their 40s still owe from when they graduated.
Colleges do. What does K through 12 education do? Send kids home for 2 years during a COVID-19 pandemic. A bunch of kids in the inner city don't know how to do math. If you're a teachers union, what do you say? Last year this started. Math is racist. We're happy to say that. 2 + 2 = 4. Math is racist. No, it's blowing woke smoke to deflect accountability for the failure of your institutions. Now you're starting to see a pattern. From Wall Street to Silicon Valley to the U.S. military to colleges and universities to K through 12 education. This was an institutional marriage of convenience that allowed one fringe of this country to slowly take control of one institution within government and outside, one step at a time. And then somebody else showed up on the scene and turned this bilateral arranged marriage into a 3-party affair. That's the Communist Party of China. See, they understand this game now far more deeply than any of us do, I promise you that. What they realized is this was an opportunity. An opportunity greater than anyone they could have invented for themselves. The Americans have served it up to us on their own. They have a word for this in Chinese, actually, in Mandarin. The word is baizuo. Literally refers to woke left white people in the United States.
Really?
And they're using it to laugh at us, but also to get ahead. Here's how it works.
They have a word for that in China?
Xi Jinping, when he's pressed about the Uyghur human rights crisis, over 1 million Uyghurs enslaved in concentration camps, subject to forced sterilization, communist indoctrination, and worse. In the worst human rights atrocity committed by a major nation since the Third Reich of Germany, what does he say? Black Lives Matter shows the United States is no better. Now, you might laugh at that, think it's an accident. It's not. His top diplomat, Yang Jiechi, came to the Alaska Summit 2 years ago, lectured us for 15 minutes about how China wants to see the U.S. do better on human rights and that China wants to see the U.S. stop slaughtering, that is his word, slaughtering black Americans. This would be laughable if it weren't for the fact that our own companies, our own universities, our own institutions, our own military lend implicit credibility to those claims. Disney goes to Shenzhen to film Mulan without saying a peep until the end of the movie, where they say, "We thank the local CCP authorities for allowing us the privilege to film here," while waxing eloquent about an anti-abortion law in Georgia or a parental rights bill in the state of Florida. Nike will wax eloquent about systemic racism and slavery 250 years ago in the United States without saying a peep about its own reliance on slave labor in places like China to get $250 sneakers that they sell to black kids in the inner city who can't afford to buy books for school. BlackRock will impose emissions caps here in the United States to companies like Exxon and Chevron, saying China will say, "Close the door on your way out." See, we thought we could make this. Again, most mistakes are bipartisan. We thought we were going to export Big Macs and Happy Meals and somehow spread democracy to places like China. What they realized, we thought we could use our money to get them to be more like us. What they realized is that they could use access to their market, their money, to get us to be more like them. One step better, they used our money to get us to be more like them, because they shut off access to the Chinese market if you criticize the CCP, but they will roll out the red carpet if you criticize the United States. Thank you, LeBron James. Thank you, Nike. Thank you, BlackRock. Thank you, Airbnb. Thank you, Mark Milley. That is how this game is played. And you know what that...
Do you debunk any of the things he's saying? Do you think it's not factual? Because I've heard a lot of people say Vivek Ramaswamy is the problem. I mean, even in my comment section, somebody straight up said I should stop bringing Vivek Ramaswamy's videos to the channel because he's anti-black. And people have debunked this in the comment section, like multiple times, sharing their own views. But do you think this is... I'm not in America. I do have my views, but I want you as an American to tell me firsthand if what he's saying is true. You know, talk to us. I want to hear that from you.
I did. That undermined our greatest geopolitical asset of all. That is not our nuclear arsenal. That is our moral standing on the global stage, by creating a false equivalence between Chinese nihilism and American idealism. So thank you. My campaign consultants tell me this story is too complicated to tell, and I've been kind of holding back for most of this campaign, but I'm told we have a curious room here, so I thought we would be honest, actually. Cut through the usual political BS and get to the heart of what's actually going on in this country. You can't win a war unless you see that you're actually in one. So where do we go from here? I'll tell you, we're at a crossroads. To borrow from my longtime idol, Ronald Reagan, a time for choosing, except this time it's a time for choosing within the Republican Party. See, he's one of my favorite presidents. He's one of my heroes because he did what he needed to do in his era. That's what made Reagan special. Cut taxes, slash government regulations. Did what he needed to do to usher in an era of prosperity, whose echoes we continue to enjoy to this day. That's what made Reagan great. Not just reciting the slogans that he uttered as though we memorized them from 1980. But my favorite Republican president of all time actually wasn't Reagan.
Trump.
It was Abraham Lincoln,
Oh.
who spoke 160 years ago when he said the dogmas of a quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. Well, I say the dogmas of 1980 are inadequate to the unique challenges we face in the year 2023. How are we going to find our way out of this to win the war that we are losing? First step, we have to take on the managerial class that starts with the three-letter agencies in Washington, D.C., the administrative state here at home.
So I just saw a video by, I'll put the name in the description so you can go check out the video. I'll put a link on there. But she was just sharing a video basically trying to expose projects to 2025, saying that the reason the Republicans and the conservatives are trying to remove their administrative states is so they can have so much power to control, almost the kind of power. She didn't say it in this manner, but from what I took from the video, it felt like the Republicans want as much power that they become dictators. Because if you take out the administrative states and, the people the regulatory bodies, then you can now directly give your own policies and that would hold weight. So she said liberals should make sure they don't vote conservatives, and conservatives must not get in power. That was in the video.
The people who we elect to run the government are no longer the people who actually run the government. So what I have said is that as your next U.S. president, if you all put me there, we will shut down the unconstitutional fourth branch, 75% headcount reduction in the administrative state in Washington, D.C. Rescind unconstitutional federal regulations. That's a majority of federal regulations on day one that we are done with that failed the Supreme Court's test in West Virginia versus EPA. This isn't some false promise. That is a majority of federal regulations that we are done with on day one. When there are government agencies that should not exist, from the FBI to the IRS to the ATF to the CDC to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to the U.S. Department of Education, we're not just going to get in there and tinker around the edges, put a good Michigander on there, Betsy DeVos or whoever else, and say, fix it. No. We are going to get in there and shut them down. That is how you revive the integrity of a constitutional republic.
It's easy to say. Can you do it, though?
That is how you unlock the U.S. economy. The hamstrings that hold our nation back. The climate cult that shackles the United States while leaving China untouched. When you get the administrative state out of the way, we will drill, we will frack, we will burn coal, we will embrace nuclear again in this country with a U.S. dollar, peg it to actual real value commodities, from gold to silver to nickel to agricultural and farm commodities, and lift that regulatory state, that wet blanket that shackles the United States. That is something the U.S. president can do. You see, I don't believe in making false promises. I don't believe in telling you, I'd love to reform the tax code, get a 12% flat tax across the board. And believe me, if we work with Congress, we're going to try to get that done. But that much I can't promise you. I can't promise you I'll repeal and replace Obamacare. It's contingent on Congress. But what I will promise you is that this is what the U.S. president has the authority to do as the leader of the executive branch of the government. I know this as an outsider. I know this as a CEO, that if somebody works for you and you cannot fire them, that means they don't work for you. It means you work for them because you're responsible for what they do without any authority to change it. So you know what? If I can't be your U.S. president and collect a paycheck from you all, the taxpayers, for more than 8 years, which I think is a good thing, then neither will any of those federal bureaucrats reporting into me either. 8-year term limits for the bureaucracy instead of civil service protections. That is how you drain the swamp. That's the first step. Shut down the administrative state. Number 2, we must declare independence from our enemy, Communist China. That is the Declaration of Independence that I will sign as your next president. That is the Declaration of Independence that Thomas Jefferson would have signed if he were alive today. You see, today we depend on our enemy for everything from the shoes on our feet to the phones in our pockets. We are in a codependent relationship with our enemy. Codependent relationships do not end well. The only question is who ends it first. The sooner we end it, the better for us. The later we end it, the better for them. So I will sit across the table from Xi Jinping in January 2025 and tell him, and he will know that I mean it, that you will no longer, the CCP, you will no longer buy land in this country. You will no longer donate to universities in this country. You will no longer turn our companies into your lobbying pawns. We are done with the game until you're playing by the same set of rules. No more forced data transfers. No more forced technology transfers. No more turning our universities to our companies into pawns to doing your bidding here in Washington, D.C. There's 4 critical areas we need in order to get serious about declaring independence from China. If you want to declare independence from China, we first must declare independence from China's climate agenda here at home. Every subsidy we award to an electric vehicle manufacturer is really a subsidy to the CCP because we depend on them like a noose around our neck for the batteries and for the materials that cause us to bend the knee. We have stopped burning coal in this country where China and the rest of the world burned more coal last year than they ever have in their history. This is a trick. This is a trick. The global climate agenda has nothing to do with the climate and everything to do with letting China catch up to the United States. You ever ask yourself...
So is he saying China is sponsoring the global climate agenda? Is that like straight up propaganda from China? I want to know if that's what he's saying.
Even here in Michigan, it's a good question to ask. Why are the biggest opponents of fossil fuels also the biggest opponents to nuclear energy? The best known form of carbon-free energy production known to mankind. Answer: it has nothing to do with the climate. Nuclear energy might be too good at letting the United States continue to be ahead of China, which is why China is the only country in the world that has a Gen 4 reactor where the U.S. continues to flounder by an administrative state that is in part captured by the CCP. So that's the first step to declaring independence from China, declare independence from the climate cult. Second, semiconductor independence. Today we depend on an island nation off the southeast coast of China for the little chips that power that television in front of me, those lights shining in my face, the phones in your pockets, the refrigerators that kept your water cold before you drank it. It's a shame that we depend on an island nation for our modern way of life, but that's where we are. We have to bring that semiconductor manufacturing capacity back to the United States of America and work with our allies to do it as quickly as possible. That is how we avoid World War III while advancing our interests. Third, our pharmaceutical supply chain in this country. Today, 95% of the ingredients powering our behind the over-the-counter medicines, from ibuprofen onward, that you get come from China. Now, I want you to
95%.
Think about me with this for a second. Yeah, people say, I'd rather not have my pharmaceuticals come from China. No, I want you to pause and understand this with me. This is the country that unleashed hell on the world with a man-made virus that absolutely leaked from a lab in Wuhan. The only question is whether it was intentional. This is the same country that is sending synthetic precursors for fentanyl at dirt cheap prices to the Mexican drug cartels south of our own border that are making synthetic fentanyl, that they're pumping across that porous southern border, due to kill 50 times the number of people this year on American soil who died on 9/11, dying of illegal fentanyl that crossed our southern border. How are many of them dying? I'll tell you the story of two parents, Derek and Kathy. Their son Sebastian, 17 years old, died because he took a Percocet that he bought on Snapchat, except what he didn't know is he wasn't purchasing a death sentence. He didn't think he was. It was laced with fentanyl that crossed that porous southern border. That is not an overdose. That is poisoning. That is closer to bioterrorism. If we put it in a Big Mac, we wouldn't call it an overdose. We would call it what it is. It was poisoning. So the same country that is now poisoning the underground pharmaceutical supply chain coming from Mexico, you think in a conflict scenario wouldn't do the same thing from the ibuprofen that you buy at Walgreens? Give me a break. We cannot depend on that enemy for our own modern health in this country. bring that back to the United States, and from Israel to South Korea to India, we require declaring independence from China, which brings me to the most important area of independence of all. That is our defense industrial base in this country. You see, the other politicians, they're not going to give you the hard truth. I'm going to give you the hard truth. If we enter war with China right now, here's the reason we lose it. We lose it. Every F-35 jet that we make, rounds of artillery, our munitions, rely on China to send the materials. 16 of the 32 critical ingredients depend on China for most of our military supply chain. This is why Raytheon's CEO is pleading with U.S. politicians to make friendly with China, because we can't even make our own defense capacity without relying on China to do it. Again, think about it with me for a second. You think, God forbid, if we end up in a conflict scenario with our adversary, do you think they're going to keep supplying us the weapons that we need to fight them? Give me a break. We need to declare independence because we never depended on the Soviet Union or the USSR, our adversary, in the way that we depend on our enemy today. And I'll be very honest with you. Will this require some measure of short-run sacrifice? It might. We have to be honest with ourselves. Some short-run inconvenience. It's not nearly as bad as they say. When I sit across the table from Xi Jinping, he will know that I mean it, because China's now in a weaker spot than we are. Their zero COVID policies had about as much to do with COVID as our climate agenda has to do with the climate, which is nothing at all. It is about power, dominion, control, and punishment. China is in a weak spot if we have the audacity to actually see it. But will there be some measure of short-term inconvenience? Maybe there will. But it's like my parents taught me. You can make that sacrifice if you know what you are sacrificing for. And that is this thing we call the United States of America. And that brings me to the final ingredient we're going to need to win this war. Not just shutting down the administrative state, though that we will do. Not just declaring independence from communist China, though that we will do. But to revive our missing national pride in this country.
National identity.
Today, less than 16% of Gen Z says they're even proud to be an American.
Less than 16.
60% of Gen Z.
Oh, 16.
Says they would sooner give up their right to vote
over TikTok
than to give up their access to TikTok. I'm not making this up. See, young people, we don't value a country that we just passively inherit. We value a country that we have a stake in building, in creating.
If they won't give up TikTok, how can you recruit these young people to get in an army that wants to go fight countries like Russia and China?
That is why every high school senior who graduates from high school should have to pass the same civics test that every immigrant has to pass in order to become a voting citizen of this country. You got to have skin in the game to play in that game. We have to put an end to the identity politics, end affirmative action in every area of American life. It has been a cancer on our national soul, and we are done with it. End the civil rights violations based on political beliefs today. To say that if you can't fire somebody for being black or gay or Muslim or white or Jewish or Hindu or whatever, that you should not be able to fire somebody for being an outspoken conservative or an outspoken liberal either. You don't choose between the American dream and the First Amendment, between speaking your mind freely and putting food on the dinner table. The United States of America is the country where we get to enjoy both of those things at once. This is how we revive our missing national identity in this country. And this is personal to me. See, I grew up into a generation where we were taught to celebrate our diversity and our differences so much that we forgot all of the ways we are really just the same as Americans, bound by a common set of ideals that set this nation into motion 250 years ago. I believe it deep in my bones that those ideals still exist. I am running for president to revive them. And this is the final ingredient we need to win a war. First step is you need to know you're in a war to win one. But the final step is you need the general who will win you that war. That needs to be somebody who understands why we're actually doing what we're doing. I'm going to level with you guys today. I respect President Trump immensely. He was the greatest president of the 21st century. And I will not apologize for that. I said it on the debate stage. I will say it to all of you. I respect him for his accomplishments because I am an America First conservative. That is what I am. That is what many of us are. I'm an America First conservative. But I am not just a Trump First conservative. The America First agenda does not belong to one man. Does not belong to Donald Trump. It does not belong to me. It belongs to you, the people of this country. I am not guided by vengeance and grievance. I am guided by my gratitude to this country. I know the American dream exists because I have lived it. Our inner animal spirit in this country, it has been domesticated, it has been tamed by this new culture that penalizes excellence and celebrates victimhood. Our inner animal has leapt oceans to lift up places like China, while their culture of victimhood has leapt back to hold us down. When we rallied behind the cry to make America great again, we did not just hunger for a single man. We hungered for the unapologetic pursuit of excellence in this country. That is what it means to be an American. We need to speak the truth again. You know the best measure of the health of our country? It is not the number of green pieces of paper in our bank account. That's important, but it's not the most important thing. It is not the number of ballots that we cast every November. That's just the final act at the end of the process. You want to know the best measure of the health of our country? It is the percentage of people who feel free to. The only way we're going to fix this is all of us, not just me, all of us, starting to speak the truth openly again. To say in public what you will say in private to your kids at the dinner table. That is what we're doing in this campaign. Speaking the truth, not just when it is easy, but when it is hard. That is what we're doing today. God is real. There are two genders. Fossil fuels are a requirement for human prosperity. Reverse racism is racism. An open border is not a border. Parents determine the education of their children. The nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to mankind. Capitalism is the best system known to man to lift us up from poverty. There are 3 branches of government, not 4. And the U.S. Constitution, it is the strongest and greatest guarantor of freedom in human history. That is the truth. We fight for the truth. We stand up for the truth. That is what won us the American Revolution. That is what reunited us after the Civil War. That is what won us 2 world wars and the Cold War. That is what still gives hope to the free world. And if we can revive that dream over group identity and grievance and victimhood, then nobody in the world, not a nation, not a corporation, not a virus is going to defeat us. That is what American exceptionalism is all about. And that is what we together will revive to save this great republic. Thank you all. God bless you. God bless your families. And may God bless our United States of America. Thank you.
Vivek Ramaswamy. Yeah, honestly, I've seen a lot of speech information, manifesto, policy announcements from most of the candidates, the people running for the next American election. But I must say, Vivek Ramaswamy must be the most mentally sound one. I don't know if it's because he's the youngest, but he's very, very sound mentally. That was a 36-minute speech, 37 minutes even, and he wasn't reading it, but it was very engaging. He gave his points, expressed everything he had to say in the right manner without even stuttering and using filler words. That's just credit of his mental abilities or mental capacity, I would say. So he's very mentally sound. Now, as far as the speech, I think it was a good speech. He stated what he's going to do. The thing is, it's easy, like I always say, it's easy to verbalize things, but the action is always where the struggle comes and the challenges you face along the way. Can you really do these things? The only way we can track if he can do these things is from the resume in the past. And his resume has been pretty good. With regards to him leading companies, it seems he's been able to accomplish so much with the companies. But running a country is a lot more different. And what we don't know is if he can. We'll see. If he gets to be the president, we'll see. This is not me disapproving that he's capable. He's very capable. If you watch my videos, you hear me say he's very capable. As a matter of fact, I do like Vivek Ramaswamy. I do believe he could make a very good president of America. But the point now is, a lot of people believe America is at a point where a very significant change has to be made almost immediately. And going off track record, they've seen Donald Trump do it before. And Donald Trump is even campaigning of the fact that this happened and we did this. So they've seen Donald Trump do it before. And people will be voting for Donald Trump based on the fact that we've seen this happen before. I don't know if that makes sense. So that's where Vivek Ramaswamy is going to have a little bit of a challenge. I just recently heard he passed DeSantis with the points. So he's getting close, but not even close enough to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is still way up there. So yeah, I think let's see how it's gonna go. People are saying, how do you select? I think that's something I should look into. How do you select a vice president in America? Do you just choose? If you just choose, I'll recommend Donald Trump just chooses Vivek Ramaswamy. If he's gonna be the vice, he's gonna be a very good combination, very, very good combination for both. But as far as him winning Donald Trump, it's gonna be a very big battle for him. It's going to be a big battle for him. But he's capable. He's very mentally sound. That was a very good speech. Very, very good. 36 minutes long, and I was engaged all the way listening. As far as the things he says about China, the thing is, if you're playing all your cards openly, or you're giving all your ideas openly, don't you think China is hearing and they're going to adjust accordingly? Somebody could ask that. Maybe he hasn't really shared his plans. Maybe that's just what he wants us to perceive. But I really like that speech. That's what I'm going to say. I oppose some of the things he might have said, but I still really like it. Share your thoughts. Talk to me in the comment section. That being said, is the end of this one. Peace.